Bonjour, Madame Valérie.
Bonjour Guiras et bonne journée internationale de la jeunesse à vous et à tout le monde.
International de la jeunesse à vous aussi. Et comment allez-vous aujourd'hui?
Je vais très bien. Merci.
Thank you so much. So, today, Madame Valerie, we will be having a very short interview in commemoration of the International Youth Day 2021. So, maybe could you please introduce yourself to the viewer, or maybe to me personally, because I don't know you quite well. Could you please tell us how does your youth upbringing or how does your youth days actually lead up to your current role as the UN resident coordinator? Do you think that there are some special memories, some special influence that you had during your youth years that actually lead you to your current role as a UN resident coordinator in Indonesia right now?
Thank you very much. Well, I am Valerie Julliand. I'm the United Nations Resident Coordinator in Indonesia. Just for the viewers to clarify, the UN Resident Coordinator is actually the highest ranking official of the United Nations in a country. My role is both to represent the United Nations and to be the main interlocutor of the government for all issues related to the UN. And I also have a role of coordinating, hence my title, Resident Coordinator, to coordinate the work of the United Nations in the country. So in the case of Indonesia, we have 20 agencies being resident in Indonesia and 4 that are not resident in Indonesia but still working for Indonesia. So a total of 24 UN agencies working to support the development, the sustainable development of Indonesia. So you see, it's quite a large family. In total, we have about 1,800 UN personnel working in Indonesia. The majority of them are actually Indonesian. We only have 250 international staff, and all the other 1,750 about are Indonesian. So you see, it's a big UN family. You're asking me what in my upbringing may have led me to become a resident coordinator. I think, first of all, whatever we are and do in our youth impacts our life later on, in positive or in negative. So that's why youth is such an important moment of life. It's something we need to nurture, to treasure, and adults are responsible to also make sure that it's a moment of progress, knowledge, and love. Because whatever you do experience in life when you're a child or when you are a young person has an impact on your future life. That is for sure. And as I say, both in positive and negative. As far as I'm concerned, I'm coming from a rather poor background. My 2 parents were working very hard, and actually both of them were working usually 2 shifts in order to make sure that my sisters and I, we had a good life. And just to give you a sense, I mean, I am the first one in my family to complete university studies. Nobody before me did that. So it means that that's already a very important element in my life. But I have to say that I was lucky to grow up in a country where education was free. So we didn't need to pay to go to a university or to pay to go to school, which is very important. I also grew up in a country where I was free to choose whether I wanted to marry or not, and when I wanted to marry, whether I wanted to have children or not, if I wanted to. And that is a very important element for the foundation of my life, because I was not forced into marriage. I was not obliged to bear children I didn't want to have. I could decide what I wanted to study, and I was supported by this overall system. So I think this has really enabled me to choose to have a better and different life than that of my parents. You know, I could break the cycle of transmission of poverty, because up until that moment, poverty was very much transmitted from generation to generation. And up till today, we know that poverty is something that you pass on to your following generation. So that's why it's so important to break the cycle of poverty. And you break the cycle of poverty through education. And I can say I am a very example of this. Because I had access to education, I could follow my dreams and I could have the life that I wanted to have. So in which way this has led me to become resident coordinator? Maybe early in life, I was aware of these social and economic differences that exist. And I think my upbringing has really led me to become an activist. I see myself as a rights activist, as a social activist. I stand up to defend human rights, animal rights, planet rights. You know, I stand up to defend democracy and rule of law, justice, because that's actually, I owe what I am today to democracy, rule of law, and justice. You know, if it had not existed in my country, maybe I wouldn't be what I am today. So I think that in that sense, my upbringing has led me to be what I am today. And also working for the UN and with the UN somewhat is certainly, for me, the best way to contribute to the promotion of human rights, to contribute to democracy, to contribute to rule of law and justice. So I would say that's what I would answer to your first question, because I believe that all this has led me to the UN, although I wouldn't say that at the very beginning I wanted to join the UN. You know, life takes you along the way, and you know, you go from one experience to another one, and that takes you where you are. But maybe when you look at it with hindsight and you turn back and you look at the way you've done, maybe, yes, you see the logic. You see where one thing has led to another one.
Thank you so much, Madam Valerie. It seems that you have a very rich youth days, rich youth years back in the past. Well, you have a very, you already have a very rich and full knowledge of what it is like being a youth, and also not merely as a youth living in Europe, but in your work with the United Nations, you have also been posted in different countries all over the world. So from your experience, whether as a youth itself in Europe, or when you were posted abroad, when you were working with the UN, now since you are posted here in Indonesia, what do you think are the most prominent, the current recent challenges that Indonesian youth are facing today?
First of all, to kind of link to what you just said before, yes, indeed, I've been working in Europe, Western and Eastern Europe, in Africa, in Latin America, and now in Asia, and right now in Indonesia. And I have to say, what really strikes me through this life of travel is that people are the same everywhere. The language may change, the culture may change, but what people need to grow and blossom, what youth need to grow and blossom, what affects people, their sorrows and pains, their hardship is the same everywhere. You know, people cry the same tears, people bleed the same blood. And I would say this is where you see that humanity is one people only. You know, and that's why somewhat racism that distinguish people, you know, in terms of their race or let's say religious intolerance or gender, differences. This all doesn't make sense, because at the end of the day, we are all the same people. We love the same thing. We suffer from the same miseries. And at the end of the day, the youth from Africa, from Asia, from Latin America, from Europe, all aspire to the same thing. So I would say that's very important to remember that, because that really unites all the people of the world under one single, I would say, identity. And I think this is a very foundational principle in my way of addressing problems, because people are the same. Now, when I look at, of course, now the economic, political, and social situation of a country is different. Not all countries are developed the same way. And subsequently, the problems that people face in their respective country may be more or less acute, depending on this level of development. So when I look at the situation of the youth nowadays in Indonesia, what I see is that there are different types of problems. There are problems, the most pressing issues are issues of education, issues of poverty, as I was mentioning, of unemployment. There is the gender inequality component that is very important, but as well issues of violence, of civic engagement, and the overall discrimination. So maybe let me look at them one by one. when it comes to education, it's very important, and I think I was telling this to you when I answered your first question, that without the foundation of a good education, youth are destined to a future that is very limited in opportunities and options. And nowadays, now in 2020 and 2021, we have the element of COVID that has come to disrupt a lot of what we do, and that has had and still has a huge impact on education. I mean, since March 2020, most schools in Indonesia have been closed. So it means that the only option for youth today is to do the distance learning. But with distance learning comes a lot of challenges, because not all kids, not all youth have the same access to internet or the same tools to do the distance learning, such as a computer. Not all of them have the same condition to study at home, whether you live in an overcrowded house or that your parents don't have the ability all the time to assist or to supervise their children. All those elements impact on the education of children, but also the physical restriction during the pandemic, where youth are very much on their own. You don't interact with other youth. It has a huge impact on the mental health of young people. And I must say, when I project myself and when I remember my youth time, if I had been obliged, like you are now today, you, the young people, to study from home, to be away and far away from your friends, not going out, I know how much it would have impacted me. And this impacts the youth today. And let alone the fact that when you are suffering from some mental health issues due to that, the access to the psychological services, psychosocial services is also limited. Plus, there is a stigma. So this is, the whole of education is really an important, I would say, issue today for the youth in Indonesia. Then the second element is the gender element and the violence that comes with it. And I really want to highlight that, because whether we talk about people in general, whether we talk about children, whether we talk about youth, the gender dimension is an added element that we should never underestimate. Because in Indonesia, for instance, enrollment in school is the same for girls and boys. So this has been a big progress. But this being said, boys and girls are not equal in many other aspects. Take one example. When girls have to face the time of their menstruation, which boys don't have to face, well, poor girls cannot afford necessarily the sanitary pads, and therefore a lot of them have to go out of school during the time of their menstruation. This constitutes a hurdle for the education of girls. Now, girls also are victims, girls and women are victims of violence, sexual harassment, abuses, and this can be within the family, this can be at school, this can be on their way to school. And you see, this is a reality that is most inconvenient to acknowledge, but it exists. So this is also another element that young girls, young women have to face. Now, what we have to consider is that when the families are facing a particular economic hardship due to COVID, which one are the first one to go out of schools? Girls, before boys. When the family needs to have somebody helping at home, they will first take their girls before they take their boys. So, that is very important. And there is another element also that is gender and that impacts girls more than boys. It's the limited access to youth-friendly adolescent health and particular sexual reproductive health information and services. So many young girls are dropping out of school because of early pregnancy, and that affects seriously their chance of a future. Now, there is another issue beyond that also affects the youth today. It's the issue of unemployment and access to decent job. Unemployment actually is much higher among young people, and it has been further aggravated by the COVID pandemic, and especially this time, not only for women, but for all marginalized youth, because not all youth are equal in Indonesia, and there are marginalized groups, whether it's geographically marginalized, whether it's economically marginalized, whether it's ethnically marginalized, but this plays a role. So you can see that the problem of access to economic opportunities is so much linked to access to a good education. You remember I was telling you about the transmission from generation to generation of poverty. Well, that's it. You see it also in Indonesia. And if you are poorly educated, what are the options for your future? And actually, going back to my gender dimension, even with an equal economic background, it is much more difficult for a young female student to find a job, and to find a job that will be equally paid as the male students. That is as well a reality. And lastly, I would like to raise also some challenges that are facing the youth today in Indonesia. It's also the shrinking of space for civic engagement for the young people in general, but even more so in the context of COVID. You know, nowadays everything is online. So yet again, if you don't have access to a good internet, to tools to be online, it means that you are very limited to have a diverse, rich, and constructive social and civic life, since nowadays, within the context of COVID, most of it is done online. Then add to that cybercrime, cyberbullying, all those cyber-related challenges that affect the youth and the young girl more than anybody else. These are issues that are very important. And the last point that I want to raise is really the challenges that face particular category of youth. I mentioned the women, but beside that, we have the youth with disability. We have the sexual minorities. We have the people living with AIDS. All those are affected by a certain level of discrimination in Indonesian society. And you know, I think young people, more than anybody else, need to be supported to be integrated into society, because rejected youth will become rejected adults. And in order to have a strong and solid society, you need to have a hopeful, happy, and educated youth.
Thank you so much. Yeah, Valerie, it is a very thorough and extensive how you address the problem in Indonesia that youth are facing are not only an abundant but also very intersectional. After we are discussing all of these challenges that Indonesian youth are facing in Indonesia itself, with the presence of the United Nations in Indonesia, what does the United Nations has done in working for and with youth in achieving the Sustainable Development Agenda of 2030? Not only what the UN has done, or maybe now, since you are new, being posted in Indonesia, what under your leadership, what are you planning to do? What do you plan working together with the entire UN country team in working for and with Indonesian youth in achieving the 2030 agenda that's less than 10 years from now?
Well, first of all, the Sustainable Development Goals, as you know, are broad encompassing. We have 17 goals compared to the Millennium Development Goals that were very basic on the sense of looking at the very basic social issues. The Sustainable Development Goals are broad encompassing, looking at both social, economic, environmental issues, and looking as well at governance. So all those elements actually are also so much intertwined and interdependent that you can't take one and say that it's more important than the other one, because you need all of them to succeed. So it means that when we look at the issue of youth, we also know that it is important that youth be involved in each and every component of the SDGs. We just cannot say that youth only need to be involved, let's say, in SDG 8, let's say on job. No. Youth need to be involved and engage in each and every SDG. So one of the first actions that we do as UN and that I continue to promote. I didn't start it, my predecessors did, and I will continue to do it. It's to ensure the engagement and the involvement of the youth in the development of all the policies and laws and activities that affect their lives and subsequently their future. So let me give you an example. For instance, in order to be sure that countries are still on track, we do regular report over the 15 years of implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals. There are different moments when a country can come forward and say, let me take stock of where I stand. How much do I have to progress or to do better and more? And therefore, these are called the voluntary national review report, where a country takes stock of what it does, where it has progressed, where it needs to progress. So what we did is that we worked and we supported the government of Indonesia in preparing this national voluntary national report. But we made sure that they engage youth. And it was so important to have the engagement of youth for two reasons. As I mentioned earlier on, because youth need to be engaged in decisions and actions that impact their lives, but also because youth have a different outlook on issues. You know, when you look at it from an adult government perspective, you may not see things the same way as you young people from your school, universities, unemployed youth position. So what we have done as UN is that we have made sure and we have supported the participation of youth in such in events and reports such as the voluntary national report. But you see, ensuring the participation is not enough. We have to make sure and to equip the youth with the skills and the capacity for a meaningful participation, because to be sitting at a table doesn't mean that necessarily you know how to raise the issues. So another thing that we are doing and we have been doing and will continue to do as UN, it's to establish digital platform for the youth participation in a meaningful manner so that they are equipped, trained, capacitated. That's also another big part of the work we do. Now, a third element of the work we do in order to make sure that youth participate in the SDGs, it's to advocate for the rights of youth and for their participation. And this advocacy is really, really important because it comes directly from us through medias, through direct discussion. So advocacy is important. Now there is a fourth element of importance. It's to generate the evidence of the youth challenges, the youth needs, the youth expectations. You know, if you don't have the evidence, you talk about, you know, it's all air. So what the UN does is that, and especially some agencies are dedicated to doing that, we work with the government of Indonesia, but also with non-governmental partners to generate data, evidence, report, and survey, so that we don't talk generally about, yeah, the youth need that. Yes, but how many, what percentage? Where are they? What type of problems? We need to have the data and disaggregated data by gender, by geography, by economic, social background, so that we have that information that will therefore inform the proper policies and laws and decisions. And finally, we also work a lot with civil society youth organization, because the role of civil society is so central and key to the achievement of the SDGs. Governments have a big role to play. Private sector has a big role to play. But all NGOs and civil society have an enormous role to play. Actually, we know that the SDG, it's a whole of society endeavor. So that's why we also work with civil society organization, youth organization, and particularly those ones that are dealing with the youth that are particularly affected. I was mentioning it earlier. Young people living with HIV/AIDS, you know, are very, I would say, at risk to be left behind. And the principle of the SDGs is leaving no one behind. So while working with civil society organization, and how do we work with them? Well, we support them. We also capacitate them. We fund them. You know, we collaborate with them on a number of activities, and especially on issues of rights to health, rights to information, rights to communicate, to education, That's what we do. And also because civil society organizations work at community level. So it's important to empower them, because at community level, they can do such an amount of work. We work more at government level, whereas civil society works at community level. So linking the two is so essential. And finally, we also involve the youth networks in all aspects of discussion, because we need to hear the opinions of youth. We need to, as I say, listen to their voice. And through that, we have the proper information. So that's more or less the type of activity we undertake in order to make sure that youth are involved, participate, and have an impact on the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals, and that whatever will be achieved will be youth-friendly, youth-informed, and therefore will prepare a good society for tomorrow.
Absolutely, Madame Valerie. Thank you so much. I also very much agree that it's this great momentum. Not only that engaging youth is kind of a tokenism, but it is it's a very great thing to do, because youth are very dynamic and they can have a ripple effect, a snowball effect to the entire population. For instance, in Indonesia, especially bearing in mind now that youth made up the largest population of Indonesia, of the staggering more than 25% of the Indonesian population. And I very much agree on that. Thank you so much, Madam Valerie. It's very insightful. I hope that this talk can inspire other youth. C'est un grand privilège et aussi un immense plaisir de vous parler. Thank you so much. And again, bonne journée internationale de la jeunesse.
Bonne journée internationale de la jeunesse à vous et à tout le monde. Et merci pour cette interview. C'était très intéressant aussi pour moi d'avoir cette opportunité de discuter.
Thank you so much, Madam Valerie. Goodbye.
Thank you.